Let's look at a few more questions trying to solve equations. Right now, I'm not really sure if it's linear or not without kind of simplifying it a little bit. So to simplify the left-hand side, we can distribute the 8 through the parentheses since that means multiplication. So in doing so, we have 32. Let's see if this thing will. So 32x, 8 times 6 would be 48. And then these parentheses really don't serve a purpose except they're just saying this is the second term. But since there's nothing to do, it doesn't even look like an 8. We can just drop the parentheses and say we have this x plus 7, then this equals 11. So to make it a little bit easier to understand, we can combine like terms. So this 32x can be combined to the 1x, which gives us a total of 3x's, 33x's. The 48 can be added to the 7. I believe that's 55. That's going to equal then this 11. So now each side is simplified. Notice the variable is already on one side of the equation. So from here, we need to move the number to the opposite side of the variable. So if we have a plus 55, we need to be subtracting 55. So if we subtract 55 on both sides, we're going to get that. So in doing this, we now have this 33x. And since these we're adding 11 to negative 55, since those are different signs, we subtract. So 55 take away an 11 would be 44. So, and since it's more negative, this would be a negative 44. And then we can get rid of the 33 because we need to make the coefficient of x a 1. Get the variable by itself. So I have to divide this side by 33 as long as I divide this side by 33. So the 33s will turn into 1x, or we just call that x. And then we have this negative 44 divided by 33. Now, since this is a fraction, because 33 doesn't go into 44 evenly, we can reduce it. I do see that each one of these have an 11 in them, because I know that like 11, 22, 33, 44 are multiples of 11. So if I divide an 11 into 44, that's going to give me a negative 4. And if I divide 11 into 33, that's going to give me 3. So negative 4/3 is an improper fraction. Your directions could say you could write it as a mixed number. So if I divide 3 into 4, so 3 does go into 4 one time. 1 times 3 is 3. 4 minus 3 would be 1. And 3 won't go into 1, so that's on my remainder. So we could say this is also 1 and 1/3. So you could write this as negative 1 and 1/3 if we want a mixed number. If they say fraction, then leave it as negative 4/3. But if they say mixed number, you have the option to change it to negative 1 and 1/3. So this would be what's called a fraction form or an actually improper fraction. So negative 4/3, remember, 4/3 actually means 4 1/3. So 4 times 1/3, if you will. So 4 1/3 really means a third and a third and a third and a third and a third. But notice how it takes 3/3 to make a whole. So I could write this as 3/3 and an additional third and an additional third, which means this is 1 and 1/3, which would be the same thing as 1 and 1/3 if we can just push that together. So 1 plus 1/3 means the same thing as 1 and 1/3. So as a solution set, remember this would be negative. You could write this as negative 4/3 depending on how they frame the question, or negative -1 and 1/3 if they allow to write a mixed fraction. So continue on to another question. We have this 6x plus 45 equals x. Again, what we can do is simplify each side. But notice how each side is already simplified, but we don't have the x on the same side of the equation. So I like to pick on the little guy. So between 6x and x, I want to knock out the x by putting a negative x here, but to balance the equation, I have to put a negative x over here. So what you do one side of the equation, you must do the other side of the equation. So when I do the math, this turns into a 5x plus 45, and that's now equal to 0. Because remember, we have a left side and a right side, so the 0 is required on the right-hand side. Now, our next move is we need to move the number to the other side of the equation. So to get rid of this 45, I have to subtract a 45, but I have to subtract a 45 over here as well. Or in other words, add a negative 45 to both sides. So 5x comes down, this turns into a 0, so we can ignore that. And then 0 minus 45 would just be end up being, we're down 45 or negative 45. Now to get rid of the coefficient, you can divide both sides by 5, and the 5s will turn into a 1, which gets my x by itself, and negative 45 divided by 5. I know 45 divided by 5 is 9, and since there's only one negative present, the answer is going to be negative. So remember, division and multiplication involve the same rules. It's like a light switch. One negative is negative, two negatives is positive. So our solution set would be this, 9. Let's look at one more example. So solving this one, we have to, again, remove the parentheses by multiplying both sides by 2. So this is going to give me multiply through the parentheses is by 2. So 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times negative 5 would be this negative 10. And then the plus 3x comes into the play. So notice that when I multiply the 2 through the parentheses are no longer present. And the x plus 6 is still left over on the other side. And also, I'm still simplifying because I can combine a 2x to a 3x and get a 5x, and then a minus 10 is equal to x plus 6. Now each side is simplified. What I need to do now is get the variable on just one side of the equation. Right now there's a 5x on this side of the equal sign, and there's an x on this side of the equal sign. I like to pick on the little guy. So I'm going to pick on this x by losing x over here, but at the same time I have to lose an x over here as well to keep it balanced. So that's that property of equality. So if I have 5x and I lose an x, that's going to be 4x. The minus 10 comes down, and then an x and a negative x is going to give me a 6. So from here, we're now going to try to isolate the 4x, try and get the variable on just one side by itself. So the negative 10 has to go to the other side of the equation. It's got to go to the opposite side of where the variable is. So if I have a negative 10, I can add a 10 here as long as I add a 10 over here. Again, I draw a line to say, hey, let's bring down the new equation. So if I simplify that math, we see that we have a 4x, the negative 10 and the positive 10 will zero out, and 6 plus 10 would be 16. At this point, you can probably see the answer. 4 times what number is 16? You should see that that's just, well, x has got to be 4 at that point. Or again, if you wanted to, you could divide both sides by 4 and get x equals 4. So the solution set there would be then 4. So there are some examples of linear equations. This is really going to be helpful when we do a little bit more of an application. So these are the basic strategies without the applications. So I'll stop there.